I am the executive director of the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. We are here in North Florida, and Florida's capital city of Tallahassee, and we serve 6 counties in our area, highly rural counties, and really kind of a far-flung district. We do work with all survivors of human trafficking, and sometimes you'll find with some of the work that is done in this field, someone group might specialize in sex trafficking, might be sex trafficking of children, might only be labor trafficking. We help survivors of both sex and labor trafficking, all ages, immigration status, affiliations, gender, sex, everything. So we're here. We do case management of individual persons. I always like to remind people, and I'm not sure that I've even shared this with our speakers today, but half of our caseload at any given time is labor trafficking. We do a lot of work as well with survivors, and we also really try to, in all of our programs, support and work, infuse the expertise of survivors and in terms of consultants, etc. We do this work with many partners. I think it's the only way any of us can do anti-human trafficking work in our communities, because of just the vast scope of someone who is vulnerable to being trafficked and who can be trafficked. So we work really closely with many partners throughout our area, doing community education, excuse me, as well as providing direct assistance to survivors. We also go out into the field and do specific training. So if you're in our area and have a specific need, please be in touch. Next slide, please. Know that on our website, it is rich with information. Recently on our youth and caregiver toolkit there, which anyway, there's the website you can see, and you can go to it, and I'll put it in the chat as we go through. We just put all of our youth and caregiver toolkit tools up in Spanish. So we have those in both English and Spanish. They're downloadable and shareable. We have lots of posters and other kinds of information. So please do that. And know, of course, that our services and support are free of charge. And that doesn't mean we don't appreciate your stepping in at any time with a gift to show that you are encouraged by what we do and want to be a part of supporting our work. Next slide. One of the new things, and I say new, we have launched our 4th episode with Samir Jain, who is a survivor of labor trafficking, is our podcast. I'm a podcast nut, I guess I could say. I love podcasts. I'm always listening to podcasts. I learn so much. So that is not why we're doing this solely, promise you. This podcast, I think, is the only one that's out there on this topic, where we're talking to survivors of trafficking. And I wanted to think of it as something where survivors tell us what they want us to know, not exploiting the worst thing about them and their lives and what happened as they had been trafficked, but really to tell us how we can do better now in our work and understanding what happened, and how we can go forward. So I really encourage you to take advantage of this, subscribe, rate, and review. We have 4 episodes. I'm biased, I promise you, but I also will tell you, I think they are terrific. I've heard that from a lot of other people. So please take advantage of this podcast and let us know really what you think. Next slide, please. Okay, today I want to tell you we are going to have a program like nothing we've ever had before in a lot of different ways. First of all, I need to really say thank you, and I'll introduce our speakers in just a moment. But as you know from the title of this program is about human trafficking, specifically with the African American community, in the African American community. STAC has worked hard for a number of years in a lot of ways in sort of trying to broaden the lens of how we see trafficking in our world. And one of those is through the lens of social justice and understanding the wider context, really, of our communities and what we do. So know that today is an attempt for us to really get a big picture of of the African American community and our society at large, as we look at the issue of human trafficking. We know that trafficking does not happen in a vacuum. It happens in the context of our culture. Also knowing that, this is a social phenomenon that's part of our collective values, our history. The biases and prejudices that we all have can come out as we kind of examine what goes on. And so as we move forward in our world, regardless of where you sit, if you're in an agency, if you're in leadership, if you're a taxpayer, if you're somebody who has a kid in school, know that you as a voter have a voice on where we put our resources in communities, where we value and who we value. And that's really a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. I just because we've been working to prepare for this, appreciate so much understanding how we can be allies, how we can be advocates, how we can inside of ourselves identify and empathize, as well as put this in the context of our history. Another point of personal reflection I just wanted to share with you is on the issue of the word slavery in the context of chattel-based slavery in our country. I don't think we can have a conversation about human trafficking and the African American community without mentioning this. So I want to throw this out for you all to think about. When we started doing this work years ago, everybody would call this issue modern day slavery, and a lot of people still do. However, in the United States, I'll tell you, that phrase has gone into disuse, and for good reason, I believe. We took it out of all of our materials because I think initially it was really to provide a sort of shock and awe to people so they would get the seriousness of this issue. But eventually I became to understand that when you call it that, you're doing a disservice to the very real history of our country of chattel-based slavery, color-based slavery, and the fact that we are still living very much with the legacy of that. And as we go forward in our conversation today, I think that's an issue. Now, we could have a debate about whether you think that's the case or not, but I really encourage you to open your mind and your eyes and think about it as we go forward, really to understand the legacy of our history and understand that this is a real thing. Second, I believe in my heart of hearts that we're all going to step in it at some point. I always like to think of it. We're always going to, we're on a quest to do better, to understand better, and to know better. So that's why I'm grateful here for both Bree and Kia, because they are fantastic, understanding, compassionate, intelligent, rooted women who know, they just know. And I know that we're going to be smarter when we're done with this conversation today. And I know I'm also going to be willing to look at what I understand as the case of life and trafficking in the African American community, and know how I and our agency, the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center, and everyone can do better. So that's sort of a broad brush look at where we're at and kind of a cultural context for what we're about to explore. So without any other ado from me, I want to talk about these two wonderful people that are going to be our speakers today, and also let you know that our goal is to have a great conversation, to learn from one another and to hear from you. So just as Lisa said, talking in the chat and the Q&A is a great way to get it going. I'm going to help moderate all that, answer your questions, and also kind of keep it going. So let me tell you who you're going to be listening to today. So Brianna, or Bree Rogers, is the is a chief executive officer of Bree Safe. After being sexually assaulted herself in the middle of 2020, Bree decided to start her own self-defense accessory line. She began with safety keychains and is now branched out to offering everything from tasers all the way to undetectable knives and even offering self-defense classes. Bree Safe is based out of Tallahassee and has helped men and women protect themselves in 48 states in 6 different countries. Bree Safe takes Bree from Bree Safe Values and takes pride in making sure everyone is safe and helping out in the community. She is passionate, and I know you're going to get this 1000% about safety and resources. She's an activist in our community for women's rights education and the quest to end human trafficking and equality. She's spoken with many groups in our community. Bree, I want you to talk more about yourself as we go forward. She is resilient. I met her at a chamber event and just absolutely, you blew me away, Bree. So glad you're here and glad you're part of our conversation today.
Thank you for having me today. Hello, everyone.
Yay, yay. Also with us is Kia Thomas, and we are so lucky with Stack that Kia is on our board of directors and is now an officer and secretary of our board. So Kia, a special thank you to you for all you do on our board. Kia is a public relations professional dedicated to the art of communications and is the founder of Infinite Public Relations Firm here in Tallahassee, Florida. With her passion for storytelling, Kia has spearheaded many successful PR, social media, and strategic communications campaigns that have assisted various brands in their industries. Kia has navigated through many roles and carved out a unique path in the world of public relation, and especially also with legal communications, because that's where I met you. And so I thank you for all you're doing professionally, Kia, as well, and your work here in the community and as you branch out. So welcome, Kia.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So now one of the things that we want to do is we want to ground ourselves with some terms and some kind of general info. So I'm going to just start us off maybe with just to make sure we're inclusive and doing what we need to do in terms of some of the words we used. And one of the things I'd like to add, and I know that you all know this, but just to share with everybody, when we talk about victims and survivors of human trafficking, we may use that term interchangeably, but I'll tell you what we've seen throughout the years in assisting survivors is that we tend to use the word victim when we're talking to someone who is actually in a situation of being trafficked. But really, when it comes to someone who is out of that situation, we use the term survivor. And I'll tell you that sometimes with some of the people we've worked with, neither of those terms work, and they don't want to be referred to as either. But if we do that, everybody in our conversation, we'll talk about that. And of course, when we talk about human trafficking, we also are talking about people who have been both sex and labor trafficked. Sometimes people hear the phrase human trafficking and they think that's only sex trafficking. Or sometimes people think they say human trafficking and sex trafficking, like human trafficking is only labor trafficking. But no, for us today, what we're going to be saying is sex trafficking and labor trafficking are both included under the umbrella of human trafficking. Okay, that's that part. The second part is when we were doing our prep, we talked about our terminology. Should we be saying the African American community? Should we be saying the Black community? Should we refer to African American men and women? And maybe I'll just start out with that and open it up to both you, Kia, and Bree to talk about how we can make sure we're being inclusive, because there may be like people in our country from the Caribbean, and maybe they're Caribbean American, right? And so they might prefer to be identified. So what are we talking about? And let's just make sure we're grounded and doing the right thing.
Right. And so when we discuss the African American community, we are including just people of color, because a person of color is also including somebody who is from the Caribbean. I know that technically I am from South Florida, so a lot of my family members are Jamaican and what have you. So sometimes they do not identify themselves as African American, but a person of color, that is what they are.
Okay.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback off that, in the African American community, it is essential to recognize both the differences and similarities, because although it is a ethnicity, it is a cultural background that kind of separates us, but we're the same, so to speak. So the acknowledgement is critical. So that's where we came up with that.
Okay. All right. That sounds good. That sounds good. So everybody knows for this topic and any others, again, everybody feel free to come on in, and also know that you're getting us now, just us. You're not getting a PowerPoint today, because you're going to get to see the conversation we hope take place in more of a real term, without having to, or, in real time, I should say. Without having lots of words on a slide. So I think that's going to be better, don't y'all? I mean,
Yes.
we're going to be talking. And so let's get a little bit grounded about the issue of human trafficking itself. I'm thinking back to when we had our coffee at Red Eye Coffee, right? And we were talking about this issue. And I think I just was overwhelmed with our conversation together, with your thoughts, with your impressions. And it just came to all of us, I think, that this conversation has to continue on. Since then, we've gone deeper. But why don't you all each talk a little bit about your own experience in terms of how you learned about trafficking, how you see its relevance in our community, anything you want to share, going from sort of, before we had that conversation, and how we came together, and where we are now.
You want to start it off, Kia?
I'm gonna throw it to you because I think you
All
had
right,
it
all right,
first,
perfect.
and
Okay.
I got your back.
Absolutely. A lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but we all know that in the African American community, Black, or just in society in general, African American females are over sexualized at a younger age. And so, like with us being over sexualized at such a young age, it definitely trickles down to being sexually assaulted at an earlier age as well. Growing up, I know that, like, in my family, my mom always told me, hey, don't sit on your uncle's laps, and it was just the reasoning because maybe somebody might try to touch you or what have you. But then like also, like, in the African American community, we all know that, like, and I mean, statistics show us that every 1 in 2 teenagers that get arrested, they are going to be African American. And unfortunately, a large chunk of that is African Americans, teenagers that are in prostitution because they have been over sexualized at such a young age.
And then just to add a perspective onto there, a lot of my perspective will definitely come from public relations perspective, but in the same token, coming up and learning about sex trafficking was taboo. It was almost as if within our community, kind of like how mental health is not fully spoken about in our community. Reason being is because there is no emphasis on the Black community more so. You don't fully see it in media news outlets. So it may just be somebody that is already informed, like a counselor. I think that's when I first got my encounter from sex trafficking or human trafficking in the African American community, because I did have a counselor in my high school that was very adamant about that. And at first you kind of look at her and like, what are you talking about? That doesn't happen to us. But it was happening. There were Black women coming up missing, Black men coming up missing. And then even when I went off to college and was about to do a documentary on it, but my Professor Mr. Jones, I'll give him his homage, basically told me that I couldn't touch it. And I didn't understand why I could not do my documentary film on missing while Black. He was like, it's going to be too in depth. You're going to have to do too much work, but I was ready for it. However, I did not get to do it, but that's how I was trying to bring more light, because you don't see us in the media. And it's crucial for developing effective awareness, whether it's in our community or even flooding over into what is the mainstream community. There weren't community workshops, there weren't seminars. So to learn that was almost like a stumble upon in regards to our community and how it worked.
Or also there were not videos and or movies that showcase and or highlight young Black individuals going missing, or people trying to save young Black individuals, whether like they be on trips or just here in America. So
Mhm.
so unfortunately society does not even accent us in the survival category. Like, don't save us.
Agreed.
And that's why it's so important. You know, when I started doing this work about 20 years ago, I would say, you know, what was depicted as a child who was sex trafficked was a white child, was a blonde haired white child. And often I would just ask people, what is going on? Why are we not being representative? Because as you're saying, and the statistics show, and by the way, I'll put on the in the chat, this will be recorded. This session is being recorded, and we'll have some other resources for you. But still to this day, we don't have, according to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, according to many advocacy groups, we don't have adequate depictions of people who are actually trafficked, so that you know that it's real. So I think we've almost jumped a little bit to the end, like what can we do? But we can start out right now saying one of the things that's been missing is that we don't adequately portray who is a survivor, who is at risk. And we don't show kind of some of those areas of vulnerability accurately, right?
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, and somebody just put in the chat, thank you. Somebody just posted, oh, Graciela, hi. Our community services advocate, Graciela, has put in information from the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And we do get lots of information there from the hotline that does show. And, you know, there have been studies that show the disproportionate impact on human trafficking. And also, I think kind of if we were to take again, that wide angle lens, look at the context of society, traffickers will target people. They'll look at vulnerabilities. They'll look at people who are
Yes.
vulnerable. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Maybe the larger kind of historical context of vulnerabilities that you might see, you know, that traffickers take advantage of?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I know that we are talking about African Americans, just in general, but I will also bring up the African Americans that are in the LGBTQ community. Because my company, we sell self-defense accessories, so pepper spray, stun guns. We're uploading hidden knives right now on our website as well. A lot of my products get shipped to Atlanta, and Atlanta is a hub for the LGBTQ plus community. And in those communities, a lot of them will get kicked out of their house earlier, and so they will have to transition to homeless shelters. And in those homeless shelters, they from the people that I have spoke with, they have definitely entrusted in the wrong people, and then were coerced into later on being, whether it was labor trafficked, some of them, and then even later on being sex trafficked as well. And that was solely just to make a living at the time. They entrusted this person, and definitely this person took advantage of them.
So you saw that extra vulnerability and that intersectionality, if you will,
Yeah.
between LGBTQ and maybe a young man who's an African American who's just been kicked out of his house, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe identifying as trans. Yeah, I'd like to
And
highlight Brenda Williams wrote, in my experience volunteering in the Miami-Dade and Broward Human Trafficking Coalition, the spotlight was given to Caucasian victims 95% of the time, and most of my clients were people of color. Even law enforcement treated my clients and criminals as criminals instead of victims. So thank you for offering that, Brenda. And I think really what you've just done is we've just had a qualitative piece of research come through from Brenda
Absolutely.
on this exact point.
And like, and
Absolutely.
unfortunately, especially in that area of Miami-Dade County, a lot of the people, English is their second language. So a lot of the
Mhm.
time too, like in individuals that have come over to the country and now English is their second language, law enforcement don't take them as seriously because whether it be that they are just completely prejudiced against them, or
Right.
because they just don't want to waste their time dealing with the language barrier.
Mhm, mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm. Another vulnerability, and one of the things we always say, and I think you would agree, or we talked about this, is that if we as service providers, as the faith community, as families, aren't providing for or supporting economically with housing and love and care, a trafficker will come in and offer that, right? And we're talking about a grooming process, right? We're not talking about
Mhm.
this snatch and grab situation.
Yep. Yep. And
And
like, oh, go on.
no, you're good. I was just going to piggyback too off of the factors that you were talking about with the LGBTQ and the African American community. But see, that then comes to a bias against the LGBT and
Yep.
individuals, which
Yep.
can then lead to social isolation.
Yep.
And what we found is that it can make them more susceptible to being exploited even more because now you have shunned them. And now it's going back to the point of, well, this is all I know, so I'm going to continue. And then you also have the age and disability vulnerability. Youth and individuals with disability are often targeted
Yep.
by traffickers. And then that goes into the social isolation as well. And they don't feel as though that they can go and report anything to anyone,
Yep.
especially the police,
Yep.
especially in Miami-Dade. So you have a limited supportive network and the dependence on caregivers for having that disability or even the age. And these are factors created to exploit this community in a sense. So that's just from a PR perspective.
Yeah, and so, gosh, I mean, maybe we can sprinkle it in here. We didn't talk about doing it like this, but as we talk, then we really do have to be mindful and inclusive in our work and our planning. Because if we aren't talking to people with disabilities or people from different cultures and ethnicities as part of our work, then we are going to be inauthentic in what we're doing and providing our services. I
Yes.
think that's just a given. So thank you I think it's really great that we've kind of highlighted that you highlighted this at the top. And Odette, thank you for your comment, just noting that developmentally disabled, learning disabilities, as well as physically. And, by the way, I want to just highlight for all of you that this issue of LGBTQ, of disabilities, of other issues, we've covered these in prior webinars, and they are available for your viewing for free. We'll give you a certificate as well. Some of you need professional development and stuff, but we'll put that in there. But Stack's website on the our what we call our resources page, we have training and educational resources, and I'm actually just going to quick grab that link so you can have that. I think we've done 3 programs on disabilities, and there's so much more we can do. But thanks for bringing that up. So Bree, one of the questions I wanted to talk to you about, we had a fascinating discussion about this. I remember just going through your work and talking about the difference between someone using self-defense because they are walking to their cars and they might get attacked, or
Mhm.
they might even be abducted, but that's
Yeah.
not trafficking. I mean, traffickers groom. Traffickers have a longer, if you will, time before someone is in their clutches or in their web of control. So, do you want to talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that issue and
Yeah.
anything you
Absolutely.
want to add in? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, because a lot of us have definitely seen the movie Taken and everything, we think that traffickers are just gonna snatch and go, whereas
Right.
whereas whereas traffickers are definitely are definitely smarter, and like they definitely like take their time. It's all about grooming. They get you to become comfortable with them. They get you to tell them maybe even like your innermost dark secrets and everything. And then they will eventually start to slowly but surely start to use that against you. Then you feel guilty, this, that, and other. And it literally is a slow process versus versus the field that I work in for self-defense. It like for okay, so if somebody's going to your car and they're trying to attack you, yes, automatically right then and there you need to defend yourself. That is an attacker, that is somebody who's trying to kidnap you versus somebody who is trying to take you into human trafficking. A story that I will share is about a woman who I ended up attempting to help with human trafficking. And unfortunately in the African American community, especially women, I'm going to say, especially women, the single Black mom, right? She has all the stresses in the world. She has to take care of the kids. Dad is not home, this, that, and other. So everything is just overbearing on that mom. Now we're going to try to discuss that same exact mom now being in a homeless shelter. Okay. So then that same exact mom is now overbeared with work, now in a homeless shelter with her children, this, that, and other. She ended up entrusting somebody. It was a woman. So a trafficker does not always have to look like a man. It can definitely be a woman as well. And so this trafficker in particular ended up getting this woman to entrust her. Her kids started trusting her as well. And then one night at a party, she ended up trying to leave this woman with a few different men, and the men had plans on taking her. Well, when the woman reached out to me, she told me her story and everything, and she even she was like, hey, like I even know the person's first and last name. I even know where they live as well. But that is not the worst thing that has happened to me. So sometimes a lot of the trafficking that may be going on, it's not even going reported because we are so overwhelmed sometimes with other parts of life. Whereas with me, my eyes shot open and I was like, you were almost trafficked. That was not the worst thing. And she was like, no, I do not want to report it because there's other worse things going on. So fortunately
Mhm.
wise, traffickers are also women as well.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Were you going to say something there, Kia?
I was, yes, that's one of the biggest things that we don't do in our community is report it. Because we are so afraid of what the response is going to be. And then there's another thing that whether it's directly or indirectly, we have now become a part of a community where we are not trusting those that are in authority. So if I go and report it, am I going to be looked at as a criminal, like you stated earlier? How did you get yourself in this predicament? How does this happen to you? Or am I going to be slighted to where they take my report and then nobody ever addresses it? Or would it be blasted everywhere and now they're coming back for me? So those are just some different perspectives that I think our community looks at even more than any other community.
Yep.
Mhm. Excuse me. I just got a frog in my throat.
No worries.
I'm good. And so those are all things that we again have to factor into our approach, right? And our knowledge. So if somebody's saying, oh, it's not happening in the African American community, that's not right. I mean, it's maybe the cases people aren't coming forward for all the good reasons you mentioned. And Bree, I really want to highlight for you, especially for service providers here. And again, our culture has looked at this issue of human trafficking in such a way that sometimes the feeling and the sense is that it is the worst thing that's ever happened totally, and that's simply not reflective of what we see in our clients as well. That it is it's part of a maybe a larger constellation of trauma, but that there might have been things preceding it that were actually worse or that have happened since. So I think really, again, taking our cues from the people that we're supporting is number one. Wanted to make a couple of comments too in the chat just to bring in some some information for you, that in the past 2 years, Jamaro from the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition has said that they have been focusing on sex and labor trafficking, and missing Black and brown humans. So thank you for letting us know that. And also that there is awareness that Broward County has been focused on. So why don't we take a look, and Jamaro, if you would like to put in the chat, if you have a link to your activities so some of us can see them and maybe take a cue from the good work you're doing down there. So thank you. You say, and we continue to sound the alarm about racial bias and human trafficking. Well, very good. And I will tell you, when I started the conversation earlier and mentioned it, I was really looking historically. That's how it has gotten better. And I think because a lot of people did raise the alarm, I just think we have a long way to go. Also from Brenda, secrecy and lack of trust of the police has an impact, right? And I believe there was a question here about, is trafficking by parents common in the African American community? I've seen it across the board, in the white community and the African American community. I haven't seen, but what do y'all think?
I feel as if, oh, go Kia.
No,
Go
go right ahead,
Kia.
I-
I feel as if it's equal across the board. It definitely just goes back, like, and depends on your socioeconomic background. So say for instance, we definitely have those stories where whether it be a non-person of color who was on drugs or something like that, and then might have sold their child to a drug dealer or something like that. We literally see that across the board with all nationalities.
Yeah. Have you seen anything, Kia, on that point, familial? When we started doing this work 20 years ago, rarely heard about it, but now I see it more as a specific category that people mention, familial trafficking being a subcategory of across the board.
Yeah, I haven't necessarily seen that in the African American community. I would have to, like, as it being a big prevalent thing, so to speak. I would definitely have to say it is truly across the board because it has a lot to do with when they make that decision. Normally, it's based on the socioeconomic background or how they were brought up, because a lot of times you repeat the past. But that's across the board. Not necessarily a prevalent thing just in the community, which also goes down to, I think, when we are putting out campaigns, marketing, and social media and what have you, there's normally, like you stated, a directive where there is a blonde hair, blue eyed girl or boy, and vice versa. When it comes to gangs, that's the first thing that people think about in the Black community, that we are only affiliated, so to speak, with gangs. So they kind of put that out there more prevalently in their marketing and advertising campaigns, as if only Black gangs, in a sense, and if you want to put it that way, are doing sex trafficking. But that is across the board, even if you probably go down to biker gangs. And as a campaign, you normally look at the bikers or whoever the gang may be, or how it's being put out there, as if this is the stereotypical thing that they do. But it's not. If we're talking about just a community, that's not the norm. That's just what has been placed out there about this community.
Okay, exactly. And let me throw it out to we've got 164 people with us today. Do any of you have any thoughts about this issue? Familial or parental trafficking. What's your experience? What have you seen as advocates in the field, or as, other people who have had a lot of work that you've done in the area of trafficking? Couple of more comments. Ami Francis has said, what about gangs? And that has a lot of trafficking in it. Absolutely. The other part about gangs, no matter how you look at their activity, sex trafficking and forced criminality which is a form of labor trafficking, right? So thank you for bringing up. Very often I see law enforcement might not think about, they see other activity in gangs of any, you know, color, race, etc., ethnicity, but they don't think about the trafficking, you know, they don't think about labor trafficking. So Amanda says our agency has had a substantial amount of familial trafficked cases. They were all Caucasian. Samantha, and thank you for sharing. I'm sorry to hear this. I was trafficked by my mama. I was just wondering if it was across the board. I'm so sorry. And I thank you for just saying this and letting us know. And when you do share that this has happened, I'll tell you, it can empower other people to know that they're not alone. So, so thank you very much. Also seeing that the Broward Human Trafficking Coalition, which website is bhtc.us, is also continuing. Victoria's talking about how bringing awareness to victims and survivor of color is great. They're doing that work, also recognizing Native American survivors and victims. Thank you so much. That's great work. That's great work. Okay, we've talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to kind of circle back, if you will, for all of you who are here, and also for our two experts, is what about the reality facing African American men and boys who are both sex and labor trafficked? I mean, part of the challenge for us in the north part of Florida here is going into our rural counties and having people say, oh, you know, if it's labor trafficking, it's only migrant farm workers, or if it's sex trafficking, you know, it's in the city and it's only agriculture. I mean, can you talk just in general? And I preface it a little bit with the challenges that we face here. But what do you think about men and boys? And also, we talked a little bit about the stereotyping of men as traffickers. Bree, you were talking about that. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you see with your, you know, your fathers, your sons, your uncles, you know, other family members? What's going on?
Especially in the rural communities, like that, like definitely with the labor trafficking, because think about it, you will be in a town, I won't say town names, but you could be in a super rural town where they might just have one stoplight, but like everybody needs a job in that town. So then it's like a way that some traffickers have figured it out. It is by going to town, picking up, pretty much getting little to low cost of labor, and then from there they might even promise one of their workers a truck or something like that. So then it's like over time the employee will try to sit there and get paid pretty much pennies to nothing to work up for a truck, we'll say, and then never receive the truck, or they will have to live in super poor conditions, but then wake up early in the morning and then manage that farm or go work in that rural community. But definitely in the rural communities with African American men, or just men in general.
Okay. And Kia, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think one of the biggest things we have to, and it's going back to one of my answers earlier, we have to start acknowledging that this is still a reality. It's imperative that we recognize it, although we mostly put things on women and girls. But the reality is that African American men and boys are still at risk too. So putting visibility out there that, hey, you guys are also at risk, will probably make them start being more aware of their surroundings and more aware of the things that are going on with them within their community. And then also in regards to men and boys, going back to the LGBTQ status, there is age, socioeconomic disparities, and then making them, again, more susceptible to trafficking. I think one of the biggest things, too, that we have to do is break the stigma. It's one of the biggest things, too, in the African American community, because number one, we don't get amplified visibility. Our voices normally are not heard. So utilizing a platform such as this with survivors and advocates to share their stories, I think it'll assist in breaking that stigma. We're challenging stereotypes and biases, because one of the biggest things, especially in our community, is that Black men are supposed to always be strong. Same thing for women. But they are supposed to be providers. They're supposed to be strong. Nothing is ever supposed to truly happen to them. I think they deserve the empathy too, in regards to if they are survivors. So I think the biggest thing is more community engagement in the African American community. This has started a full platform and dialogue for those things to happen. And if we can continue to keep rolling that out, that'll allow us in the African American community to not only make our fathers more aware, but our sons. They need to be more aware as well. But knowledge is power, and educating the community is what empowers the community. So I think that's my perspective.
That's great. And I want to kind of blend in one of the comments here from Latasha, who says, why are teenagers very casual about trafficking and openly try to get other teenagers into trafficking with them? And one of the things that Samantha responded saying, I believe it's because they don't realize they're being trafficked. And then again, some people know it. Look at the heads nodding, but it's easier not to acknowledge it. Yeah. So any thoughts?
This will also possibly go into social media. It's almost like it's the metaverse, right? Things are being provided to them. And one thing that I did find out, for instance, there was this young girl that was talking about how she actually assisted, it was on 2020. She assisted with helping other girls get trafficked. Unbeknownst to her, she didn't really know she was doing that because she wanted the money. They told her for every person she brought, she would get $200, but she was already being sex trafficked. So in her brain, it just looked as though, hey, if you come, I'll give you this piece. But it was allowing her to be a part of, because of course they were showing up at this big mansion. They were giving away massages and many other things. But in her brain, from her story, she was indicating she at the time did not see anything wrong because it was getting the bills paid for a sick mom that she was trying to take care of, and she was still trying to get through school at the same time. So do you make the decision to not get those bills paid and not bring the young girl there? Or do you make the decision of, I'm going to do this because my mother is sick, socioeconomic situation, that's a vulnerability, right? And I've already done my piece, but I need more. They say if I bring more, I get more. And I'm giving them a piece. It's all about, again, and this person met her on social media. And this is why I brought up the factor of social media. It's there, it's telling them this is something easy, something quick. And it was, because all she had to do was spend like 2 hours and make $200.
Yeah. And so thank you for bringing in that wider world of social media and how people can be so easily tricked on it. And again, I know we keep kind of expanding to say this happens to everybody. And then we're coming in sometimes to show how it might have a specific angle or aspect that might be unique to the African American community. But there you go. There's an example, I think, of this idea of intersectionality where the socioeconomic needs are so extreme and someone might be I just put, by the way, for the conversations about youth, I put in the chat now, we were guided by a survivor who is a consultant on this project, by parents, by youth. by a lot of individuals in the African American community as well. When we developed this youth and caregivers toolkit that's online. So I really encourage you all to do that. Because there are specific things that parents can do. Also, Kia, to your point, to be wary and aware. I have people say, I know one of the things we paid attention to was a mom who said, I know where my daughter is, 24/7. Well, your daughter has a phone. So there's no way you know where she is 24/7 because you're not watching every single game she plays or every interaction she has. So thank you for mentioning the online dangers to use. And also the sense of kind of, I don't know how to put this in a succinct way, but the idea that sometimes there's such misinformation about human trafficking, like that thing about putting the tissue on the door handle where a trafficker will do that so that drugs will go from your hand, from the tissue to your hand, and then they'll snatch you. It's this false, there's so much terrible misinformation out there online. I just have to always say that when somebody says, it's an issue. So just know that. So, so Amy is saying, Kia, we have a case like this now that we're handling, and I'm not sure, Amy, or Ami, I'm not sure how to say your name right. I'm sorry if I got it wrong. Which one you're talking about, but I
think she may be talking about the one with the mom, the girl with, the sick mom.
Okay, great. Shiri is asking, recent contact with a child in this environment, law enforcement contacted, widely expressed another child can't recruit and help. I'm not sure I understand this question, Shiri. Can you all see this question? There definitely, it sounds like there was a recruitment by a child of other children. The answer is yes. I mean, I think that's that we have seen this. And Sherry, if you'd like to clarify your question a little bit and help us to be able to get to the nub, please do that. And I think Lisa's saying it's important to educate our young people about how youth are recruiting other youth. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up, Lisa. And really have that education come from people in their peer group, in their friend group, right? I mean, I told you all the story about how we were doing training in a group of Cultivating Queens, the group, Bree, where a junior in high school was with her mom and other mentors. That's the group Cultivating Queens. They work a mentoring program with youth. And she said, I think this might be going on with my girlfriends, her junior in high school's, her friend and the friend's 24-year-old boyfriend. And we stopped right away and started talking about how that youth could talk to her friend, how the mom might talk to the other mom, how they might try to see if the mom wasn't a trust, if the daughter who was with this 24-year-old wasn't having a good relationship with her mom, maybe there was another trusted adult she could talk with.
Absolutely.
But there's definitely there. So wow, lots of great comments from you all. Have you seen law enforcement deny that it could be happening in terms of this youth recruitment? What do you think?
I wouldn't be able to speak to that point only because I have not seen it based on the question that and how it's posed. I haven't seen them deny it. You can only talk from the experiences of survivors or victims where they have indicated it's been brushed off. But I have not seen it.
Bree, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, what we have seen, and I have seen law enforcement who are trained understanding very well the idea of recruitment, but I've also seen where victims who, what I would say are victims who are also recruiting as part of their being under the control of a trafficker are also arrested.
Yeah.
And that sort of complexity around their status as both a victim and a perpetrator is very vexing. It's very hard for law enforcement sometimes to have the information to parse that out. But it's also important that they be aware that the dynamic is not like this person is the trafficker. There's somebody higher up in the,
Correct.
so yeah. So Amy says, I think law enforcement, at least in rural areas, are probably not well trained in what trafficking is and looks like. We recently had an issue with local law enforcement in this type of situation. Maybe we can say, Amy, I think that law enforcement is not unique and that people who are helpers in our community across the board need more training on human trafficking. And it needs to be a constant, like even with healthcare professionals, it's one and done, 1 hour. If you're a doctor, nurses have to have 2 hours every 2 years, but come on, that's why we're here doing this work. Yeah. So, and on the other hand, I will say I've seen law enforcement who are absolutely on it and work intensely and closely with survivors. In fact, if you haven't looked at some of the work that's done in terms of law enforcement training, it would be really important to do that. So, so there is good work being done out there. Let's see, what can we talk? We have so many other questions here. Any other questions I've missed on the chat, anybody? And I apologize if I have. You all have been so great. Things are coming in left and right. But so somebody says it's not a training issue, it's a heart issue. What you think is how you help. So that's a really important, you do have to care, Jamaro. So thank you for bringing that up. But if they're not trained, that's a problem. So maybe it's both. I don't know. So what about, I know we've talked a little bit and we've got a few more questions that we have both, we all went through when we were doing our planning on this. Kia, do you want to talk about messaging and what we need to do? Like, you're on the board of STAC. I have thick skin. You can say, hey, Robin, we need to do this and such better. But what should we all do? Whether it's from your, position as a board member, your position as the head of a PR agency, your position as a powerful woman in our community, what should we be doing to sort of set the record straight on this topic, especially in the African American community? Maybe talk about churches, maybe talk about other networks. What do you think?
I think with setting the record straight on this particular topic, we have to focus on several key strategies. First, we need to challenge ourselves on debunking the stereotype that's perpetuated. There are a lot of misconceptions about trafficking, which we've discussed, and victims in general, and particularly in the African American community. Second, it's vital to emphasize that anyone can be a victim in trafficking. So that's just the first two parts. But lastly, you should underscore the criminal nature of traffickers, making it clear that they exploit and harm vulnerable individuals, right? So how do we do that? We go a little deeper because, number one, the messaging has to be sensitive. It's a sensitive subject, and we have to make sure that we look at the African American community and what it requires. We need to be thoughtful, culturally competent at the approach. So some strategies that I would say for effective messaging would be cultural sensitivity. Understand the unique historical and social and cultural aspects of the African American community, where I come from. Ensure that the message or the messaging respects and reflects these factors. So collaborating with community leaders, like you just stated, which the church is a big thing in our community. Influencers, and I don't mean just social media influencers. What I'm talking about is those that are on the ground, advocates, activists that are out there doing the work, such as yourself. And again, just being in the community does not mean that we are limiting it to just the African American community, because it takes allies in opening the eyes of what people should see. You got to have cultural experts as well to craft a culturally sensitive message. You then have to empower. And what I mean by that is that you're highlighting the strengths and the resilience of the African American community. And see, everything I'm saying now has everything to do with messaging. And that's the only way, in my eyes, from a PR perspective, that you are going to get the pull for this community to be able to fully trust and jump on board of, I should start paying attention to this. And then you go into the inclusivity, so to speak, recognize all of the vulnerabilities within the community. True enough, it doesn't affect every single one of us, but there is some aspect of a vulnerability in the African American community that all of us experience at some point in time. So if you're addressing those factors, such as the socioeconomic disparities, which you've gone through, discriminatory policies, and other inequalities that can contribute to trafficking, then I would kind of go into the authentic storytelling. You would then tell the story of through testimonies, I would say, and through the survivors that have come out of this community. How do we know this is really happening if you don't identify who these survivors are, right? And a lot of times we need that as a belief. I need to hear a testimony, kind of like a Google review in a sense. And then you have personal narratives, which I think this is what Survive and Thrive is doing. You're showing those personal narratives, and that can be a very powerful tool to pull in. Then if we even go even deeper, we can talk about educational initiatives, community engagement, and then getting a law enforcement type of collaboration. I truly believe that a lot of those things have to be done, especially in the African American community, because we don't get the visibility. And that's just in a nutshell.
That's a big nutshell.
Sorry.
Is that all?
It's so much more, but yes.
Thank you. No, I think that sounds great. So, so let me throw it out to the group too. I know there's some conversation about, and here's an example, Kia. Just let's see if we can take Rhonda's comment here, which is talking about how hard it is to get a minor child to understand they're being groomed. Law enforcement made an arrest. Mom was trying to protect, daughter would keep sneaking out. Difficult to make the daughter, actually, you know what, it says minor arrest, but I will tell you, adults, the same thing happens, where when you're in that stage of being groomed and that person is answering every one of your prayers and making you feel like you got what you need, you're being loved, or you're being cared for in a way you never have been, it's really hard to see that as being harmful, right? That's the whole point of the trafficker's skills. So just knowing that, of course, this is happening in the African American community, what do you do? Kristen weighed in and said, I agree, they often are in a relationship, don't realize they're being groomed, or what we find, they don't realize they're being trafficked. So yeah, and then Lisa's saying she used to keep her kids home from spending the night with others to protect them from adult predators. But getting back to your whole idea of what we can do in the African American community, this is one example of youth who are being groomed and may not know it. So how could we start to approach that, like, as an issue? What would a campaign look like? Like an awareness campaign or an open campaign? Actually, it's more like awareness and take action. And let me throw it out to the group. Have you all done this before yourself? Have you had these kinds of campaigns, specifically maybe targeted into the African American community, or a specific one? Or have your campaigns been community-wide? But what about that? How would you start spreading the word about the dangers of being groomed and being aware?
I mean, well, when we also have to think about it too, because I'm gonna backtrack a little bit about how Kia was talking about our community leaders, right? And I mean, we in the African American community, we definitely do lean on the church the most, but unfortunately, churches are sometimes, and a majority of the time, extremely judgmental and crucial. So say for instance, if it was an LGBTQ African American individual who was suffering with something and tried to go to, probably would not feel comfortable going to the leader of a community, I mean of a church per se, because they were already shunned due to their sexual orientation. So
Mm-hmm.
my biggest takeaway is just have a heart. Literally, I wish that more of our community leaders, whether it be leaders of churches, leaders of organizations, were more open and actually had a heart, and to put their own bias aside because somebody might need help. I
Mm-hmm.
don't always agree with what what a person might be going through, but at the same time I have to be there for them regardless. And so if somebody is not ready on day one to get help for being trafficking, who's not to say that maybe on day 432
Mhm.
they will be ready?
Mm-hmm.
But it literally took for me to have heart and for me to really be there to try to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Have empathy, please.
Yes, that's what I was just about to say. From a messaging standpoint, when you were asking the question, Robin, definitely, Bree, start the messaging off of empathy and solidarity, and then make sure
Mhm.
you focus on a positive message that offers hope, as well as a vision for a safer future. You know, that's really what most of them are looking for. It's stress free in a sense, and then show them the resources that are accessible to them. Are you reachable? Where can I go to get this? Are they going to shut the door on me because I didn't make it at a certain time? You know, providing this to them and letting them know empathy, solidarity, positive message, accessible resources. That would be my first phase of a messaging process for that type of
Oh
campaign.
my gosh, I
And Bree,
have to
you hit
write,
it on the head.
say that again. Empathy,
Empathy and
solidarity.
solidarity. Then your
Yeah.
positive message comes in, and
Pos-
then you show them the accessible resources.
Okay. All right, everybody, do you have that? Do you have that? That is it in a nutshell. I mean, how we do that is up to all of us in kind of community to figure it out. Empathy, solidarity, positive messaging, and accessible resources. And we have to make sure that our resources truly are accessible. Like, let's talk about what that means. Like, if I don't have thank you know Graciela for being our community services advocate.
Mm-hmm.
She is an accessible advocate for people who do not speak English. So we have that accessible resource as Stack. But I can see a lot of places where we don't, like, and then we have to reach out to others in our community. But, all of these pieces, empathy means you're working on yourself too, right? I mean,
Yes, absolutely.
how many times do we need to think about saying, there, but for the grace of God go I, right?
Yes.
So how do we have that empathy with another human being and not otherize? I put the podcast link up there again. Christabel Robinson in our second podcast talks about the absolute danger of otherizing and how otherizing empowers traffickers. The moment we
Mm-hmm.
say that's them, it couldn't be me or my daughter or my son, that's when we've just given the trafficker a leg up with that person. That is the
Mm-hmm.
opposite of empathizing, it's otherizing. So Lisa wants you to put this in the chat. There we go. Empathy, solidarity, positive messaging, and accessible resources. If we could have that be our sort of our action steps going forward.
Yeah.
Solidarity. How about that? Oh my God. And then positive messaging. One of the things about the testimonials I want to ask you about and get your thoughts on, often people, victims, survivors are being asked to tell their stories. And it's actually exploiting people's pain for the purposes
Yeah.
of fundraising and it's not good. We're seeing that happen. You're nodding. What are you thinking when I say that?
I totally agree with you because you can almost see in some campaigns the agony that they have of even retelling the story. So you don't know if they have fully healed and were they really ready to tell that story yet, right? I think when we're telling the story, we have to come at it from the end and then go backwards. Show how they've overcome, show the positive outcome from what they've done. You have a lot of survivors that have now become advocates or started their own nonprofit and are now trying to start legislation that will impact fully. So starting from the end and then having them tell their story backwards, that might be best. But a lot of times, I think a lot of campaigns, they try to start with an impact of doom, doom, doom. This could happen to you. And you feel the doom and gloom. Whereas if you start from a perspective of a positive message and what you're trying to do is cultivate raising awareness and fostering change, that's different. And then they kind of tell bits and pieces of what have happened, and then maybe on a more intimate level you give it all. But I truly agree with what you're saying, like the doom and gloom type situation. It does look a little bit like a spam, so to speak, Google review. That things are just being put out there.
Yeah.
Whereas coming from another perspective of a positive message and then leading into it, you not only pull in victims, you pull in those that now want to become allies. Like, how do I stop this? For instance, I think I shared this with you, and I can't wait for us to collaborate for the cheer team that I assist in coaching. We literally got to Atlanta and we're in this portal. My daughter cheers, all-star cheerleading. It's over 200 something girls, right? All the parents are arriving. We know we're together because we have all this stuff on our cars. We're here to support our girls. Then we get this alert of be aware of a white truck or any truck, any man. They're just telling you things. It's just random. And now as parents, we are trying to figure out, my husband and I literally got out of our car. Thank God we didn't have our littles with us. And we were like, how do we protect her? Okay, you go this way, you go this way, I stand this way. You were coming up with things on the fly. That's scary, right? When you see that. I think when you start more so with a message of, this is an alert. We just want you guys to be mindful. But the way we got the alert was a scare tactic. So again, I use that just to say, if you're scaring a community, right? That was the cheer community. But in an African American community, if you try to use a scare tactic, funneling it down back to community, it needs to come from a positive light. So it's not, I know that's a long answer to what it was, but positivity is always the best way to start. And you pique our interest more. We already go through so much within our community that to know that this is another thing that we have to combat, it's better to gain the allies and gain the fostering of change than it is of, I just want my hands off of it through a campaign of drudgery. And if you get the positivity, I think that brings in more people wanting to help.
Yeah, and Bree, you are positivity in action in what you have done and how you have Bree safe. I mean, I think about that and what Kia was saying. You have any thoughts on this?
So I'm gonna like pretty much like funnel in what Kia mentioned, and then also it's like one of the comments that we didn't go over, but Miss Brenda Williams said the Black church does not have a realistic or holistic approach to human trafficking. However, many Black civic organizations are very supportive. I've spoken to sororities, fraternities, and 100 Black men.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I am coming from the viewpoint of somebody who works heavily with the LGBTQ plus community and my customer base, they do not feel comfortable leaning on the Black church, unfortunately, because I mean they are seen as they're already committing a sin. Not only that, the majority of the time they have been kicked out of their Black households that were predominantly Christian based as well. So it's just like as far as like I would like for more people to be able to turn more towards a church to lean on as well. But it goes back to what Kia said, to everything like Kia had mentioned before, having that empathy, like actually like being open and accepting of other people as well. My customers end up being shunned and then moving away from what like they originally were around, and then moving to even worse situations when maybe in their hometowns, if they would have had a great organization to lean on, I will say per a Black church, maybe they would not have moved away and then later on escalated to other avenues of help. And so it literally goes back to everything that like Kia was saying, her like the empathy, solidarity, positive messaging, accessible resources, literally all of it. Trauma response is necessary. All of it is what those institutions are going to have to do if they are going to want to help out, whether it be our youth or the individuals who are a little bit older than youth. Try to lean back on them.
Not sure about that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And really, again, you've hit on issues of the intersectionality, that one size is not going to fit all. We're a diverse world with a lot of different people and needs. So thank you for bringing that up. And earlier too, I think Kia, you might have said, you really have to go into people's strengths. You have to go into and tap into the strengths of what's available. And that might be in, I don't know, not in a traditional place. I don't know where that could be, but I'm thinking, I always think about in my days, I did lots of work on domestic violence, and they would say, like, if you're working in maybe a community, in a rural community, a lot of the women who might be victims couldn't go to a domestic violence awareness class, but they could go to a quilting class. So what's the equivalent of that for a group who might be in need? What's the equivalent of a quilting class that would be a safe place where you could get the information? Let's go back. We're kind of nearing, this has been an amazing conversation. I want to kind of, now we're at the last 10 minutes of our program. I want to make sure that we have touched on the comments that people have made, that we might need to answer a question. If you are out there and you made a comment and we didn't talk about it and you want to bring it up again, please do it now so we don't miss you. And if anybody has any other questions or comments, I would really love to see people talk about where they have had success with any of these 4 items: empathy, solidarity, positive messaging, and accessible resources. I will tell you that, and you have the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center website. I will tell you, we've worked really hard making this a rich sort of place for people to get information. And just in case you might want to hear or see any of this again, I'm going to put the link in where we will post the recording of this webinar, which we have, by the way, all the other webinars for the last couple of years, excuse me, are here. So that's one of the things that we can offer to you all about this issue, is that if you want to go deeper on any of these topics, know that that's available. And also, y'all, let me just mention on the side, January is Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Why don't we all develop this as part of our theme to make sure everything we do that month embraces empathy, solidarity, positive messaging, and accessible resources. Kia, I think you've just
Yes.
made it.
Is that
glad I could help.
I think we can say this to everybody. There's your messaging for January, and then you just make it happen in your way.
Yes.
So, or take one a month. I don't know. But I really love that we're doing this, because what we're talking about is important. And I want, oh gosh, who was it? Shira said, and make sure your trauma response is necessary. When Shiri
Yes.
or Cheryl, sorry,
Yes.
Cheryl Johnson, when she mentioned that was in it was just to the hosts and panelists, but you can send that to everybody too, Cheryl. But here's the
Yes.
thing. When you typed that, Kia, you were talking about not exploiting. We were on the topic of not exploiting survivors because they're not ready. I mean, that is called being trauma informed. And there are so many levels and layers, and making sure that you are appropriately, trauma informed and present.
Absolutely.
All right, great discussion from Nipa, our president-elect. Hey, Nipa, glad you're
Hey,
on board on
Nika.
this one. Yay. Sister board member there. Conversation, engaging, impactful, amazing women. Oh, yes,
Yeah.
indeed. And of course,
Thank
my
you.
phone is ringing just as we have a really good training at, what is CNSWFLW? Okay, Brittany Patterson, please tell us what that acronym and the TBRI, just so we all know what you're talking about. Awesome and powerful, good session. Children's Network of Southwest Florida. Thank you, Brittany. All right, everybody can Google the Children's Network of Southwest Florida. I want to ask you all too. This is the first time we've had like really an open, free flowing conversation. And from what I'm getting from you all, that's good. I mean, we love our PowerPoint presentations, right? But isn't it good to just talk?
Yes.
So glad, so glad. All right, ladies, I know we had our cheat sheet of all of our questions. I'm thinking we got to everything as just an opening. So wow, I think we've done it. So thank you all. Good old-fashioned talking. You're right.
Yes.
Anything else that you want to do? How about a couple of concluding statements? And if you can talk, if you want to say anything to other people who have boards, Kia, and Bree, I know you're we're just kind of looking at you. I hope we'll be able to say that to you soon as well. But
Yes.
but what can we do in terms of making sure leadership on our organizations and in our communities? And I don't mean just nonprofits. I mean city and county commissions. I mean state represent. What can we do? Like any comments on leadership and how we do this?
So
Approach.
from my experience, like dealing with self-defense, sexual assault, and now human trafficking and everything, unfortunately, people get very uptight and uncomfortable with those situations and those conversations. So what I always just have to stress to all the individuals that I ever talk to is that it is time to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because guess
Yes.
what? It literally takes a whole team, and it's going to take a village to hopefully eventually be able to put an end to human trafficking. If we do not have these conversations, people are not aware. Even if it's just people making up myths or what have you about oh, like if somebody puts a tissue paper or something like that. Even us trying to debunk these myths of
Yes.
what human trafficking might look like. Even us even opening up the conversations to just being, when people think human trafficking, we all for the most part our minds just run to sex trafficking. But in reality, especially like up here in the panhandle, it's a lot of labor trafficking going on.
Half our
Yes.
So
caseload is, yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Yes.
So just please be open, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and have these conversations, please.
Absolutely. I would think, although we live in Florida, you guys take this out. Leadership needs to take on a multi-pronged approach, starting with our youth, educating them, again, collaborating with and having community workshops, comprehensive educational programs that actually make sense when you collaborate with these influencers and the leaders that are here in Florida. Also, making informed decisions on who we put in leadership. And then make sure that we are supporting survivors' voices. I think that is one of the biggest things when we're talking to leaders. And Robin, when you say leaders, I'm looking at it from a corporate standpoint all the way up to our state government, even down to the small businesses, paying attention to certain things that go on in order for us to be able to recognize all of that. So I think it's necessary. And just like Bree said, become comfortable with being uncomfortable. That is the only way change happens. And when we continue to educate a community, we are blossoming up an entire community of being aware.
Beautiful words. That's another one. I just want to take that right now and
I'm rolling it to you,
make
Robin.
them real and put it out there. I mean,
You can
I want to
have
do
it.
that. We have this recording, so we're going to do this now. By the way, for all of you who record anything, we just decided, why did we take so long to think of this? But we've got video now. We're going to make little reels of this. Is the wisdom that came from you two is amazing. So thank you. And as we conclude, so as we conclude, I want you to know that the next program is November 17th. This will be with Daniela Donoso, who is with Legal Services of North Florida, and Vanya Aguilar, who is with the Human Rights Center at Florida State. And we're going to talk about immigration and what we can do. I mean, talk about an important community that is often left behind, is otherized, is misunderstood, and there are things we can do. So we need to be smarter about our responses to foreign-born individuals and this issue, and in general. So everybody, we're going to have the link. If you sign up for the Stack newsletter at the link on our homepage, you'll get information about that. And you can always check our newsletter, so you can also sign up and register. And y'all, again, January is Human Trafficking Prevention Month. Let's please all kind of get on board with the Kia mantra. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your kind words. And we will see you next month. And thank you, Just in Time Training, and Lisa at